victory and the agony of defeat.
Great ball around the corner, Petticini. He beats them all. Junior Polar out wide, bumped away from Trindle. Sharks coming through. None of them can hold this.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Tip Sheet Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020. Joining me for one of our rare non-live appearances now as we have a little pre-recorded preview is my good mate, Sixties. Big fella, it's been a very busy week for us. We've been out at Kellyville, had a chat to Steve Georgallis, and that'll be part of a special episode of the Tip Sheet coming up shortly. But yeah, we've been keeping ourselves busy. Eels been keeping themselves busy in the hunt for their breakthrough win of the season, mate, which we'll get to shortly. But as always, how you doing before we start talking football?
Yeah, mate, really, really well. So as you're listening to this, we're discussing our Eels Elite Pathways preview, brought to you by Parramatta Eels Club. So this episode, we're looking at all of the Eels junior reps games this weekend. And please stick around because the preview itself with us is going to be relatively brief because we have our special guest, Steve Georgallis. We were up there at Kellyville yesterday recording with Steve, looking at the season to this point for all the grades, and then also for each of the teams looking at their games this weekend. So we've already had a bit of a discussion with Steve about that. So we're not going to jump straight into, we're not going to spoil any of that with our chat about it now. What we're going to do, John's just going to go over our the team lists. We'll give our quick predictions, and then it's over to our chat with Steve Georgallis where we can go into a little bit more depth. But of course, thank you to Parramatta Eels Club for their great support of Junior Rugby League in the Parramatta District, incredibly generous support of all the junior clubs right through to Eels Pathways Football. And they sponsor not just our podcast, but of course our weekly coverage of junior rep action for the Parramatta Eels. So thank you to the home of the Eels, Parramatta Eels Club. John, let's get into it. First off, we've got two different venues again this weekend. The girls' pathway teams are out at Leichhardt. The boys' teams are at Lidcombe. So it's, I think, West Tigers or Balmain and the West Magpies with Lidcombe. So, yeah, I'll throw it to you for the team lists.
Yeah, so we coming off that global bye or the wet round, the recovery round that all the teams had there in the pocket in case there was any games that were rained out or otherwise cancelled. And I don't think that was any allocation used this time because it's been hot throughout the summer right now for all the junior reps. We'll go chronologically out of order because we do start our previews with Elisa Fioala generally, and they kick off at 1 o'clock p.m. 60s, you alluded to it, they play out at Leichhardt Oval, taking on the West Tigers. Eels in the Elisa Fioala, it's one of our two grades that remain undefeated as present going into round 7, and they're obviously looking to build on that record, stay in touch with the top of the ladder because even though they are undefeated, I think they sit third on the ladder 60s, so it's pretty busy and congested at the top still, and they look like this. At fullback, you got Ire Sevilla. On the wings, it's Sienna Bonello. And then Freedom Crichton Rapati. In the centres, Georgia Wanzi and Hine Rikiti. And then in the halves, Sharon Latapu and Tamike Withers. So a lot of familiar faces there in the backline 60s. We got plenty of talent there. Obviously, we spoke about it with George. Little teaser there. But Freedom Crichton Rapati certainly making waves across the entire club for her outstanding form down that right wing. Moving to the pack, Layla Tafili and Leonia Vey are the bookends. Bailey Ma Chong is at dummy half. In the back row, we see Kaizen Morgan Pritchard and Mitzi Cairns. At lock forward, Katia Duff. Then on the interchange, Alicia Meza, Mere Sivo, Kaivinia O'Callaghan Ahio, and then you got Anika Penatani, and then the extended roster, Deja Vivella and Evelyn Kuwendu. So it's a good bench there, 60s. We've certainly seen some great performances from Sivo. O'Callaghan O'Hio's had good impact off the interchange. Alicia Mees has been there as a utility. So it is a good team. It's a team that's really been building across the nearly 2 months now in the junior reps. I suppose it is technically 2 months when you factor in the global bye because it's 7 games plus 1 bye. So they're travelling really nicely now and a chance to consolidate their position on top of the ladder. But as we spoke to with Steve, you don't take these games for granted.
No, you don't. So the Eels are one of two undefeated teams in the Eels pathways teams. As you said, we spoke with Steve Georgallis in depth about what's happened in the season up to this point, and then what he was expecting this weekend. It's that run through to finals football. I'm confident they'll get the job done again this week. We're going to see the odd change or two to the usual lineups across some of these Eels teams because they're going to look to get some players qualified for finals
eligibility. Exactly. So
yeah, so they've got to play a
couple
of games. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've got to play a couple of games during the season to be eligible to play finals football. So there may be the odd change that we read out that happens this weekend. But again, as I said, an undefeated team. They're building into the season nicely. I expect them to continue on with the job. And that brings us to the Tarsha Gale, mate.
Yeah, 2:30 p.m. kickoff, same venue, Leichhardt Oval. Eels in Tarsha Gale off back-to-back losses heading into that global bye 60, so they need to turn things around and quickly. And they look like this in their pursuit of that breakthrough win. Dallas Graham-Wivell is their custodian and fullback. You got Sualo Lafonga and Avina Rakoma Ngada on the wings. Jessamine Aluale and Maria Fasavalu Farmasuli are in the centres. In the halves, Sammy Lee Gunn Ta'awi and Aliyah Sofan have been there pretty much all season, doing a pretty solid job, and they're reprising their roles there. Front row sees Tess McWilliams and Taylor Falanico as starting bookends. Ava Jones a dummy half. In the back row, you got Fontaine Tafua, Matoisha Kalepo and Kylea Gray. No Riverley Arlaw, and Steve explains why in our chat with him shortly. Then you got Rory Mueller, Lilietta Pooley, Alana O'Loughlin, and then Layla Kewick on the interchange. And then finally, extended roster, Anahira Payakau and Christine Tongia. So no doubting the talent there, 60s. But the Eels, they got ambushed by the Sharks a couple of weeks ago and then played some pretty ordinary football against the Panthers. So they've sort of had like mixed results. The Sharks were outstanding, but then against Penrith, they were their own worst enemies. So getting back to fundamentals very much, I think, the focus this week. And certainly when we spoke to Steve, he was emphasising the 1%ers and the fundamental, aspects of the game being critical to them getting back on course.
Yeah, absolutely. Started the season like a house on fire. As you mentioned, got ambushed by the Sharks. I think that maybe that caused a little bit of self-doubt to enter into the minds. One thing we know for sure, the completions and last tackle options last week against the last match against the Panthers left a bit to be desired. And that's obviously something that they're really going to have to work hard on this week to get back into the winners list. Will be a tough encounter for them. But I look, there's too much talent in that team. I expect them to get the job done. You're going to be covering the girls' games live. I'll be covering the boys' games from out at Lidcombe. So you're now expecting a double win, John?
Well, quite confident in at least Fioala. Obviously, again, not taking your opponent lightly, but they've been building beautifully. And for the Tarsha Gale, it's not a question of talent. It's just about that headspace, and if they can just reset there mentally and get back to playing clean football, then certainly I think that perhaps, and I was about to say, barring perhaps the Bulldogs, who are generally the benchmark of the competition, but I feel like in the Tarsha Gale, it might be a bit more open. Let me just have a quick gander at the ladder. Bulldogs still, they're still the best team. I thought maybe it was a little bit more open than that. So, yeah, look, they can take on pretty much any team in the competition. Maybe perhaps barring the Bulldogs, who are just continue to be like the competition's best team. But it's just all about their headspace. And if they can reset off the bye, because funnily enough, the bye I felt hurt them last time. They had the momentum and had that bye, and they sort of got ambushed by the Sharks coming out of it. Maybe they can reverse the roles now. Maybe coming out of this bye, they're going to be energized. They're going to be the ones looking to ambush the Tigers.
Yep. Okay, so now we move across town to Lidcombe, just a little bit further west.
Not a great viewing venue, I have to say, Lidcombe Oval.
No, not
old school athletic track. And
yeah, I look. I'm going to be honest. It's not a ground that I'm looking forward to blog from. I've blogged from there.
Get the binoculars out. Who's got the ball?
Yeah. So I'm gonna use this opportunity to apologise in advance if I get a few names wrong or miss out on a try
You
score.
almost end up like just trusting positions. Like
Yeah.
if the ball's on the left and you look at the team sheet and it says that you've got, say in this case, Zach Withers playing Harold Matt's left edge. I assume that the back row being there would be Zach Withers. So yeah.
So anyway, I'll throw it to you for the team list for Harold Matts.
Yeah, nice and early start, 10:30 a.m. out at Lidcombe Oval. As with the girls' games, and we didn't mention it, but obviously TCT coverage and then Bar TV coverage, so you can get these games live both via blog and via video, and you can always join that conversation on the Cumberland Fro. Always happy to have people give us some feedback about how the juniors are travelling and sort of talk about how individual prospects are faring. But we are moving to the team list here. Riley Davis at fullback, Kobe McCloskey and Santiago Uwata getting a chance to start on the other flank there, which will be the left, I believe. So Kobe's been locked into that right edge, but now Santiago getting a chance to make an impression. In the centres, Cyrus Bloomfield and Christopher Moala, Talon Rosati and Caleb Leata'au. Caleb getting a chance to start alongside Talon there. So another player that perhaps talking about that finals eligibility 60s, he gets a chance to impress just like Santiago. In the front row, we've got Stephen Nunn and Kasinga Noah moving from the back row into the front row. So interesting little transition there for Kasinga. We'll see how he handles that. At dummy half, it's Jiro Trey Stewart. In the back row, Michael Noah will be on one edge, and we just mentioned him, but Zach Withers on the other. Now, I said left, but I do think Kasinga played the right, I think, so Zach will probably be on the right then in that case. But I could be mistaken about that. At lock forward, though, no mistake about this one. Samuel Polly, one of the Eels' most consistent players this year. He continues to work in that middle role there. On the interchange, Hayden Bell, Chase Attard, Strantz Schmalkel, Curtis Brown, and then the two reserves, Epapara Tahu Apiata and Jermaine Fa'afiu. So again, certainly lots of talent in this team, 60s. Quite a few changes this week as they sort of shake things up and activate players for eligibility down the track, assuming that they make the finals. And that assumption of them making the finals starts with a win here against the Magpies, because the Eels, they've got to win pretty much all their games in hand now.
Yeah, and we spoke with Steve as people here just about we addressed the inconsistency of this team, because they're 2 wins, 3 losses and a bye. They're yet to play their best football. And
we saw the game against Penrith. That was quite close to their best, but it was a solitary experience right now. So
yeah, well, look, that looked to me like they were getting on that path, but then the last up, they let the chance slip away, didn't they? Really, that's what it came down to. So they're almost the antithesis of what's happening in the SG Ball, where the SG Ball are finding ways to win. And unfortunately, the Harold Matts have found a way for a couple of matches to slip through their hands.
Very much
so. Again, we need them back on the winning track this week. And it's just really a matter of, as you said, nailing some of the simple things, because I think they had a completion rate that was in the 40% or something, wasn't it, the other week?
Yeah.
You're just not going to win games of football with an error rate like that, those incompletions. So get the completions up in the high 70s to 80%. Just nail the little things and they'll be back on track. And I really expect that they will do so this week, because they have to. So simple as that. John, that then leads us to the SG Ball, the second of the Eels' undefeated teams.
Yeah, and they've obviously got a draw to their name against the Roosters, being part of that undefeated experience, but they've been really good since that round 2 draw. And they take on the Western Suburbs Magpies at 12 o'clock p.m, Lidcombe Oval, and they've got a few changes this week, 60s, so it'd be interesting to see how they fare, because they've shaken things up a fair bit. And again, this probably speaks towards finals eligibility more than anything else, because this team is not lacking on form. But we start at fullback with a big change. Cameron Bamblett comes back into the team. We last saw him back in rounds 1 and 2, deputising for Lorenzo Talatina, who I believe was injured at the time, and he did a solid job in that capacity. He now comes back into the team at fullback, so some legitimate positional versatility there. Be very keen to see how he handles that number 1 there. On the wings, Dom Ferrugia will run the right sideline. And then Aiden Kaborian comes in onto the left. We saw Aiden in the mats going back 60s, and he did a very good job there on the wing. So he replaces Lorima Rokosuka.
Did Aiden play some edge forward and then some centre? I just have it in my head that he...
Maybe centre. Maybe centre. I always remember Aiden because he was part of the the Mats game against the Sharks where the big Cronulla centre ended up losing his mind and getting sin-binned. And I think Aiden was helping sort of unravel the threads there during the game, doing a good job getting under the skin. So he gets a chance, though, to replace Lorima on the wing, while Nathan Howlett moves into the centres from fullback, showing again some positional versatility. Nathan's been really solid at fullback, but now gets a chance to showcase his wares in the three-quarter line. And speaking of showcasing their wares, coming back from injury, I believe, Lachlan Vella. He's been out for a little bit and was really good before he got banged up, so he comes back into the centres. And he should start based on exposed form this year on the right edge 60s, with Howlett on the left, I believe. So we'll have Vella and Faruja on the right, Howlett and Kaburian on the left, if I'm not mistaken, but don't quote me on that just yet. In the halves, we've got... Well, that's a funny little clerical error I just realised. So, as named, in the halves, we have Lorenzo Talatana and Elijah Shane Tapau on parramattaeels.com.au. What I do believe is the actual jersey configuration is Lorenzo Talatana in the 6, Lincoln Fletcher in the 7 and not the 8, which is their, obviously, frontline halves pairing who have been outstanding in their extended run of form. In the front row, we just mentioned him, but big Elijah Shane Tapau should be starting alongside Ryder Talangi as the two bookends. Lachlan Koinakis is a dummy half. In the back row, we've got Josiah Funa Ayuda and Christopher Petrus as a couple of seriously big boppers on the edges, with Max Popo at lock forward. Then on the interchange, Tom Summer, Bo Lucian, Trace Beattie, and then big Isaac Jim, with Lorima Saukuru and Dylan Pryor as the two extended reserves in this game. 60s. Look, again, you're not counting your chickens before they hatch, but the SG Ball, they've done the hard work. Like, their schedule is now opened up. They're playing lower-seeded teams in their final 3 rounds of the competition, including the Western Suburbs Magpies. And those teams are going to be hungry and frantic to try and secure a berth inside the finals, no doubt. But in terms of exposed form, the Eels have certainly had their harder rivals already. So the question becomes, can they get the job done on Saturday?
Well, can they get the job done? The answer all season's pretty much been yes, because they are undefeated. They find a way to win, or in one case, they found a way to draw.
Yeah.
And
that was a crazy game as well against the Roosters.
So we talked to Steve about what that means for a team to not just to continually find a way to win, and his answer, especially talking about how the coach views it as well, is quite interesting. So please stick around for that. But look, I think based on exposed form, as you spoke about before, the Eels get the job done. They get it done pretty much for the whole reason they have got to get done all year, which is that they're winning the bigger moments. You know, the moments that determine the game. They've found a way to win those, and they don't give up. And for that reason, and the fact that they are, with all the matches in this run through to the finals, they are the favoured team. They've just got to be careful they don't get ahead of themselves. So, mate, that just about takes us through the preview. As we said before, please stick around now, because we get to have an in-depth chat with Steve Georgallis about the season to date, what we can look forward to in the run through to finals football. And then, of course, we'll catch up with Steve at the end of the regular season. So stick around for part 2 of this Para Leagues Junior Reps special preview.
We're 2/3 of the way through the Junior Reps regular season, so it's a good time to talk about how they're performing as we head to finals football. And of course, the person that we check in with is the Eels Elite Pathways Coaching Director, Steve Georgallis. Steve, thanks for joining us once more.
Thank you, Craig, and good morning. Was it still morning? Good morning to you both.
Yeah, just morning as we begin to record this podcast. Got a quarter of an hour left.
So let's begin with the 2 undefeated teams and kick off with the Lisa Fioala Cup. Now, even though they're undefeated, to us it looks like that's a team that's been really building into the season, with their most recent victory, that 46-point shutout against the Panthers, probably being their best so far. How would you assess their season to this point?
Yeah, they're playing some really good football at the moment. Ryan Walker's got them humming along. I think their completion rate last week was 80%. And, for a young team of 16, 15-year-olds to complete at that high rate, and they're still learning the game, is testament of how well they really are going.
Yeah, and I think that's I like hearing that stat because that really fitted in with the eye test, watching them and just feeling this is a really
week-on-week
this is a
growth.
really good performance, because I think when you're getting a score like that, there's that chance that you overplay your hand, and you get a few errors that come in, but they stuck to what they needed to do, and it was a good performance, not a flash performance. It was just a really good performance.
No, it was a good performance leading into the tougher games they've got coming up. Obviously the Bulldogs is the number one team in the Fioala. And to test those bigger players out, you have to compete at a high rate, which means keeping the ball in play and then, working their bigger players over. But if you give teams like that the ball, then it's going to be a long day. So, he's getting him ready for the bigger games. He's doing a great job with that team, and they've got a few good players there. Got E-Ray at the back, Tamika and Sharon to get the team around. Freedom scored a freakish try last
didn't
week.
She what?
Which you only see in the NRL.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And
Terrific finish.
And she's been practicing that, so it's no fluke that she did that. She's tried it before, and just she's been practicing it, and it came off on the weekend. And lucky for us, the photographer's got a great shot of it. And we've actually been talking about it for the last 2 weeks. How proud we are of those girls and the way they're developing and the way they train, and it's going to be great for the NRLW in the next 4 or 5 years. Those girls coming through. When
I was watching that live, and I thought to myself, did I just see that? That's how good it was. And just as another measure, and I'm sure he doesn't mind me saying this, after one of the training sessions last week, Sam Tuiviti came over for a bit of a chat, and there was some young kids there as well that were really keen to meet him, and he took some photos and that with them, and then he also spoke to them about their football, asked them, do they play in and all this sort of stuff. And the girl there, I would have said she was about 13, 14. He started saying to her, you've got a good pathway there that's now available for girls to play. And I said, gee, there was a good, I said the standards improved. There was an amazing try, on the wing last week. And Sam knew all about it. He just goes, oh yeah, Crichton Rapati. Yeah, he said, amazing, isn't it? And he started talking about her, her background and all this sort of stuff. So, when you've got NRL players that are aware of what the young female players are doing, it's a measure of the connection that's now there in the game, and the respect that's there for the young female players.
Yeah, spot on. I think we talked about this last year about the massive area that the Parramatta area is, and the development teams and the pathway teams. And you're right, in the female side of things now, it goes all the way through. You've got your development teams, and you've got Leslie Fioala, Tarsha, Gale, Harvey, Norman into NRLW, and it's a great pathway. And I feel Parramatta are probably the leaders in that sort of area in the female game, and the coaching that they're getting. We've got Ryan Walker, and we've got Shah Henry, we've got Mickey Withers. Some really good coaches there that are helping those girls, reach their dreams of obviously playing in the NRLW. So, yeah, I'm really happy with the way the Lisa Fiala's going.
We were doing the split updates that week because it was the nightmare 5-game stretch with Flegg right in the middle, and I was doing the Lisa Fioala, and I was banging out the updates, and I just sort of subconsciously did the Martin Scorsese absolute cinema pose there when she scored. Just like put my hands up, like, did she get that?
Yeah,
it was just incredible. So yeah, the Fioala doing great guns, Steve. And you sort of alluded to some of the teams that they got coming up on the schedule, and that's what I want to talk about now, because they're undefeated, but they sit in third place based on their points differential. And looking ahead, they played the team that you mentioned, the powerhouse Bulldogs side, who have been the benchmark in the women's pathways for the last couple of years. And that's their final regular season game in round 9. But in the immediate future, they've got the 5th place Tigers this week, and they're a pretty handy side in their own right. So is there a risk of looking too far down the track at that sort of banner final round game, or are the girls going to be taking this game one at a time?
I understand where you're coming from with that, because, again, they're a young group. But Ryan Walker's done such a great job with them, and I know they'll have a few players out this week, and they're not going to take the Tigers lightly because, from what I'm hearing, I've only been at Parramatta. I've only been at Parramatta for about a year and a half, but seems to be a bit of rivalry in the women's game with the Tigers. So I don't think they'll be taking that game lightly at all.
Definitely been talent going both ways across the two clubs, and I think that helps contribute to a very healthy rivalry there. And yeah, I think you mentioning Ryan Walker there is very salient because he is very seasoned as a pathways coach, and he's sort of been there and gone deep into the finals with the Tarsha Gale in the past, and now he's been a really good hand at the helm or the rudder there for the girls this year.
Yeah. No, definitely.
Steve, the other undefeated side is the SG Ball. Much like the Lisa Fioala Cup team, they arguably played their best football against the top of the table Raiders last round. Prior to that, John had referred to them as the Cardiac Kids for their great escapes. But what does it say about a team that doesn't necessarily play their best football but still refuse to be beaten?
It's a funny thing because again, Mitch Lewis has been coaching this grade, and he's been coaching this grade for a fair few years. And sometimes, obviously, when you're watching them play, you think they're not playing well, but they just have lapses. But Mitch always says to me, he turns to me in coach's box or if we're outside watching the game, he says, we'll get this team, and he has the utmost confidence in his team that they'll play the full 70 minutes. And that's what they do. They play. So, the opposition have to compete with him. And he's got a fit team. He's got a team that have, a few individuals that can pull games out of the fire. I think we saw that with Lorenzo one week. But, they're, again, they've played some of the tougher teams and come out on top. So, again, I feel that the only thing that could hurt them is injury, knock on wood. But, I'm hoping, compared to last year, that they go deep into the finals.
And I suppose you sort of mentioned pulling it out of the fire there. What's been encouraging is that while you certainly have had individuals like Lorenzo Talatino stepping up in those clutch moments, it feels like that every different unit, whether it's the back line, the forward pack, the bench, or the halves or the spine, have contributed in those big moments. And I can remember games where, Josiah Funayuta got the offload away to... was it Bo Lucian?
I think it was.
The forwards,
we've seen obviously Lorenzo and Lincoln and Nathan Howard do great things there. Lockie Kornakis at dummy half. So it's been, like you said, they're not leveraging just the one or two players. They're finding ways to win across the park. So really, really encouraging stuff. And you mentioned that schedule opening up just ever so slightly. And again, you never want to get ahead of yourself, but they're the only undefeated team left in the grade after knocking over the Canberra Raiders the other week. And they've arguably faced their toughest regular round matches, and they've had some absolute humdingers this year. But do they now need to guard against getting ahead of themselves? Because I think they've got three of the lower position teams on the ladder left. So in terms of pure ladder form, you can expect them to try and run the table here. But rugby league's not always that simple, is it?
No, and they're going to come up with games against teams that are trying to get into the finals.
Hungry to get into that, those last spots.
But I don't... I watch this team train, and they train with great intensity. Mitch won't allow complacency, and he's that type of coach, and his coaching staff. And I just think that, that they'll keep going the way they have been going and competing and making sure that they're ready for the finals.
I got to say that you love watching flash teams score lots of tries, but gee, it's good to see a team with some genuine resilience in them, and that's what the Eels have had this year in the SG Ball. They've just dug deep consistently, so well done to Mitch and the boys for sure.
I popped down and watched them when they did a Saturday training session in the pre-season down here, and it was quite a long one. I remember thinking to myself, geez, these boys are fit because they're not getting... there's no shortcuts with what's happening out there. This is as intense as you see in senior football, happening with rep football. So
they're a tough and physical team as well.
Yeah.
But, we talk about that mental toughness, but they also like to play football.
Yeah.
And I feel that's sometimes where they get themselves into trouble. But you can't stop them playing football.
Yeah.
Because that's how they win games.
Yeah.
And I suppose
also
that
how
goes
they-
back to you and the cardiac kid sort of comment. But that's why Mitch is so confident sometimes when they are behind for whatever reason. He's confident that they can fight back from that because they've got the talent, they've got the mental toughness, and they've got the fitness on their side. So, but you don't want to be doing that too many times. But
No.
yeah,
That's why coaches either have grey hair or no hair, I feel.
Yeah. But that, you know what, that's also what you talked about with, you don't want to pull them up from playing football. But I guess when they're playing that sort of football and chance in their hand, that's a learning experience where it's like, okay, probably I shouldn't have done this here, or that worked there. That's a big part of that elite pathways, isn't it? That learning process.
and that's what they've got to play football, because if you're not playing or competing, then that's where you probably let yourself down in the relations if you do make a mistake. Where if you're competing and error does come from playing football, at least you're learning from them.
Yep, absolutely. The Tarsha Gale side, they began the season with 3 lopsided victories, but they've since come back to earth with consecutive losses. A couple of weeks back, the Sharks really ambushed them. It was a really terrific, aggressive game of football from the Sharks that they played. But with respect to the Panthers, the Eels really looked off their game in the last match. How have you viewed those last 2 performances?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. They started really well, and I suppose we always knew with the Tarsha Gale team that their strength was probably their middles. With River and Armani and Tess, Fontaine and Matuisha there in the pack. Kylia Gray, she's been great when she comes off the bench.
Yep.
But then we had a few injuries in the last 2 weeks. I mean, River got a HIA and she's out for this game. They're just making uncharacteristic errors, finishing on the sideline for kicks and all these learning experiences that he didn't probably get in the first 3 games. But we're hoping that, talking to Shah, the coach, that they're learning from those experiences about, not finishing on the sideline for kicks, make sure you get your kicks to your corners right. They're disappointed, but I know that they'll come back this week and put in a performance. They've just got to, I know it's a silly thing to say, but they've got to hold the ball and just get to their kick.
Yeah.
And they'll find that they'll be in games. When they don't do that and they give the ball away in field position, it's that sort of competition where, 8th team can beat the 2nd team.
And I know that our listeners will probably understand and relate to where you're coming from, but if you haven't seen junior reps, it sounds like an oversimplification to just say hold on to the ball and get your kick.
Yeah.
But you are so spot on that Craig and I have always spoken about this, that the coach that can just get their team to an 80% completion rate and just get to their kick, you will dominate the junior reps through the regular season 100%. And it's funny because it does carry through to senior football too.
Oh yeah, no, it does. And like we said before, you got the SG ball team. They're playing football, but they're also doing the simple things right.
That's
they're
right.
kicking the corners.
Yep.
They're competing. They're challenging. Their kick chases rate. All little 1%ers,
Yep.
but also playing football, and that's why they're great to watch. And Tarsha's sort of half doing their 1%ers, but the other half, which is the simple things, and getting to your kick to corners, make sure that you're chasing, making your one-on-one tackles, make sure your markers are working. They're the little things that they've got to get right, and they've been getting it right sometimes, and then sometimes they're putting pressure on themselves by not getting to their kick, or finishing on the sideline. And they're the things that they need to learn.
Yeah, it's like last week especially. I
gonna
thought
say
those
the
last
Penrith
tackle
game,
options were, stood out as being
Sort of
okay.
self-defeating.
Yeah.
And that sort of leads us nicely into our final question for the Tarsha Gale, which we touched on it before, but there is a nice little rivalry building with the West Tigers, and they face the West Tigers this week. Balmain, Western Suburbs, whatever you want to call them, in their joint venture form. They sit 3rd on the ladder, having suffered just 1 defeat. And what does the side need to do against the Tigers to get back into the winners list? And you mentioned those 1%ers, and that's certainly going to be, you've got to imagine Shah's one of her real big coaching points this week. Is there anything else, though, when you look at them? Is there matchups or just...
I think, again, with this game, the game will be won in the forwards. And I think the rivalry between the Eels and Tigers may lead to quite a fiery game through the middle there. And I think that's the way that Shah will be leading for the team. And I think they're going to be aggressive and compete. It'll go a long way to be able to beat the Tigers in that game. But yeah, it's going to be a tough game.
You mentioned, no River, obviously the talismanic lock forward. So I know that you sort of, the one way of looking at it is we're down one of our best players, but obviously the alternative is that this is now a great chance for someone to step in. Collier Gray gets the start at lock forward. She's a fantastic ball player, through and at the line. But then you've got Tess McWilliams and Taylor Falanego up front. So there's opportunities here for the girls to stamp their authority and make a claim for more playing time.
Yeah, that's definitely right. I mean, I think Kalia's been great for us this year.
Yeah, she's jumped off the screen. Or the
She's a ball playing forward, and obviously got River there, who's very similar. But she's been great coming off the bench. She's been playing big minutes, and changing games as well.
It ties in beautifully to what we were talking about in the green room, as well as what we spoke about with Dean Witter's 60s, is the importance of that value off the bench, isn't it? So Collier Gray gets a start this week, but have shown how important injection off the bench is.
I think she's got great vision for a young player.
Real natural footballer.
I think she comes back from a sevens background, rugby sevens background.
That would make a lot of sense. Yeah.
But she loves playing rugby league, and she's one to watch. Against the Tigers.
The final team to look at, of course, is the Mats, and they've had what can best be described as an inconsistent season. Their record's 2 wins and 3 losses. What do you put that inconsistency down to, Steve?
Oh yeah, it's all about learning. They've had a few injuries and a few players not play in particular weeks. We have, Josh Hodgson's done a great job coaching them and getting to the point where they're competing and playing football, but unfortunately they're just not getting there. They're losing games by 2 points. They're leading games by 2 points and getting beaten at posts. So they're not far off. To an actual fact, very similar to what the Warriors were last year. They were losing games by 2 points, 4 points, and then all of a sudden got it right for the last 2-3 games. They went on to win the competition.
And didn't just win by 2 points, they were smashing.
Yeah, they were.
They smashed all the undefeated teams.
So we're hoping that that's going to be similar for our Mats boys, and they come out and win the next few games and go into the finals, and everyone's looking over their shoulder. But mate, they're a chance. They've got some good players in that
There's
team.
no shortage of talent in that group.
Sam Polly, Gasinga, you got Talon Rutzi, you got Riley Davis at the back, you got Cyrus Bloomfield as well in the centres there.
Kobe McCloskey's been pretty handy on the wing this year.
Yeah. So there's some good players that have put their hand up. I mean,
some young ones too, that would have another year in Mats as well, that are just starting to show up.
And that's right. And you know what it's like. I mean, as long as you're competing in. So I know sometimes it's unfortunate you lose games by 2 or 4 points, but again, at that age, it's a learning experience.
I think the only really bad result they had was against the Roosters, where they were just off the pace.
And I think their completion rate was below 50%, which, as we talked about before, and you've talked about, if you've got 80%, you're always in the game. But
conversely, if you got less than 50, you're going to be struggling to be in the game.
Correct.
And obviously, completion rates are going to form part of the answer to this question. But what will you be looking for from the Mats over the final 3 rounds to see them qualify for finals football? And in general, as a coaching director, what do you want to see from them to finish out the year?
I think, if you're playing a team and they're competing, and you're competing as well, that's all you want from your players. But for them to be a successful team in the last 3 weeks, I just feel like that they need to be playing a brand of football where they're physically matching the opposition. And I think that will go a long way to them winning games. So they've been in and out of games physically. And teams, I don't know if you've been noticed, but teams have been getting a roll on. And they're finding it very hard to get it back.
Yeah, you see those runs of possession and momentum going against them.
And that's where they've got to change their mentality of, once a team's trying to get on top, we've got to up the ante and we've got to try and get on top. And Josh has been talking to him about that, about having a physical presence, making sure that physically they're in the game. And I think if they can do that in the next 2 or 3 weeks, they're a chance of sneaking into the final.
It is an expanded final series too, so there's going to be opportunities to, if you can get 2 or 3 wins in the coming 3 weeks, put yourself right in the mix for sure.
Well, having a top 8 now instead of like the top 5.
Yeah.
There was a lot of teams that their season would be over real quickly. In junior reps.
It was pretty unforgiving.
Yeah. It was like if you start off with 2 losses at the start of the season, you're behind the 8 ball from early on.
Exactly.
And especially given it's a short season, and not just a short season, but by virtue of being a short season, there's the luck of the draw that comes in, where I think there was one year, might have been last year, where the 3 teams, there were the 3 undefeated teams, including us, and I think it was the Bulldogs and Wests, and we had to play both of them.
We got to the finals.
And I think, did we draw against both of them, I think?
Yeah, I think we did.
Yeah. And whereas
they
only had to play they only had to play 1 game against that group of 3 rather than 2 games, which was against us. They didn't play each other. And of course, then you had the Warriors just came out of nowhere anyway to be the bolts out of the blue. But that draw is very, very significant in junior reps. Very telling. Now, Steve, we can't have a chat with you without getting you to put on your other hat.
Yeah.
Because we've been getting a little bit of news through Eels Media about how things are happening with the roster with regard to the NRLW. So how are things coming along for the 2025 season? Have you got any updates that you can provide for supporters?
Well, other than those extra signings that we talked about, Martha Mattielli, Paige from England, and I suppose it's all over media now. Madeline Jones is pregnant.
Great news from a personal perspective. But, obviously,
we're very happy for Madeline. She's wanted to start a family in the next 1 or 2 years and didn't expect it to happen this quick. She had another year, but that just obviously leaves a spot for us for this season, and we're not rushing. We'll see how things go, see what's out there, watch the Harvey Norman. I think we've got like 1 or 2 weeks prior to the competition starting before we have to name our 24th. And obviously we've got a few good development players there that we can push up if we feel like there's not anything out there that we need. So.
Yeah, we had a couple of really solid performing props in the Harvey Norman Women's Premiership last year, so I'm not sure if they're still with us contractually, but there's options internally.
Well, Rochet's with us still. River and Tess, development players as well, that are playing Tarsha at the moment. So, we've got a few options there.
And I was, on the sort of back of that, last night I was having a poke around at a potential team list, and I won't bother you with how I put the configuration in because it's going to be way off eventually, but we still got a pretty handy team, mate. I'm very excited to see.
Yeah, look, we strengthened a few positions and we kept the majority of the team of last year. So.
And you're going to get some handy players back that you barely got to see last year. Boss Kapua, Ruben Charrington, Kendi Charrington. So there's a couple of handy players there that you get some production out of.
And again, you go back, I think every NRLW team will be the same. Get a few injuries and then, you've only got 24 players. So
you can.
It's a longer season as well. So we're playing 11 games instead of 9.
And it's an expanded final format too.
Yeah, and it'll be the top 6. Yeah, so
it's exciting times. Really seeing the NRLW starting to find its full stride here. So really keen.
Well, we're actually, when you think about it, when the final series is the top 6 and the first couple of years of the competition, it was only a 4-team competition. It shows the growth that's occurred in a very quick period of time, in the women's game, because really in those first couple of seasons, it was almost like they were showcase games rather than a premiership.
Yeah. Just couple of rounds and then straight into the finals.
Like you lose your first game, well, that's it. You're not going to play the grand final.
I think Parramatta got in the grand final and they only won one
22, they won the one regular round
Yeah.
game. Then they ambushed the Roosters.
But then
week
beat
one
the
of
Roosters in the first week of the finals. Scraped in on for it against with the one win that they got in the last round, and then into the grand final on.
It was a very tough and close competition last year, and I think it'll be the same. I know we've got two new teams coming in, the Bulldogs and the Warriors, but I think the Bulldogs have bought well, and the Warriors will be strong with all the New Zealand players that they can choose from over there, and the ones that have gone back. So it's going to be a very tough, close competition again.
Yeah, well, I mean, we won more games last season than we'd ever won in a single season, and the measure of that was that we couldn't qualify for finals football, and theoretically could have still won that last game and still not qualified for finals football. So had even more wins and not qualified. So that's a measure of how tight the competition was, and how you're just going to have to really. Well, I guess that extra position does make it, improve it. But those extra two teams.
I think it's the same as the junior reps. You've got only a certain amount of games. You have to start well.
That's it. Yeah.
And when we look back, in the Cronulla game, we beat them, we make it. They beat us, they made it.
Yes.
Yeah, that was
a game
the
of
singular
2 points.
result.
Yeah,
exactly.
one singular result. Yeah. So it's really important you start well. Same with the junior reps, and that you hopefully can win those first few games to set you up for the rest of the season. And I think, obviously the SG Ball's done that. Tarsha started that. Harold Mattis always seemed to be behind the 8 ball, trying to get themselves going. And Lisa Fioala, they started well and they've continued as well. So I think in those shorter seasons of 11 or 12 rounds, especially in the NRLW, you've got to start well.
Yeah, because you always talk in the NRL how it's a marathon, not a sprint, and God knows right now as Parramatta fans, you're hoping that it is a marathon and we get the results down the track. But it is a different mindset for those other formats where you've got 2.5 months to perform. So if you do start 0-2, it is just
it's very hard. Yeah, it's very hard. Well, not let's say you can't do it, but it makes it hard.
Well, we didn't touch on the Jersey Flag in this conversation, but last year, they started off at 0-7. But there was a game earlier in the year against the Tigers where they had the game done and dusted, and then conceded a whole string of
3 or 4
tries, and got run down. And ultimately, they went on the best run that you'd ever see in the back end of that competition.
I think it was like 13-2 at the end.
And that game ended up probably determining that they didn't make the finals. So I always say that, for the longer marathon, for the shorter competitions, you have to start well. For the longer competitions, you may not win the competition in those across those opening rounds, but you can lose it.
Yes,
still,
correct,
so
it's those close ones.
Yes,
you have to win.
Yeah, absolutely,
agreed.
Absolutely.
And Craig mentioned that you wear 2 hats at the Parramatta Eels, and that is very true because we just gave you those questions on both the junior reps and the NRLW. But you got another hat too that you juggle because you're not long back from Vegas, where the Greeks men and women's teams took on the United States of America and also played some nines. I know that we had some weather and field conditions that influenced some of the results there, but how was the trip?
Yeah, look, mate, I've been involved with the Greek Rugby League for over 20 years. My father came out when he was 17, 18 to this country and introduced me to soccer first.
Of course,
and of course I went to play rugby league, and he's always been a big supporter of mine. And then when an opportunity arose to try and get rugby league played in Greece and those of Greek heritage to play rugby league, I jumped at it, and it was just to pay back my father and what he went through to get to this country and make a life for myself. And I thought, what better game to take back to Greece? And they love it.
Yeah,
they love playing rugby league in Greece, and it's been a long battle to get it in Greece and having teams to play over there. But when we get an opportunity to play in nationals, everyone pays their own way. Everyone pays. It's one of those things where we know the players are playing because they're passionate about their country, Yeah, so it was a very expensive exercise, but very enjoyable because we beat the USA.
Gave them
on
a
the
good
Friday.
thumping too.
Yeah, and they were very happy, and it was a good night, the Friday night in Las Vegas. Yeah,
So it's always great because obviously my father being Italian has a very similar story there as a migrant to Australia and having that passion for round ball football, the classic football, and then embracing rugby league. And it's great seeing those multicultural ties. And rugby league, even though it's only played in a small corner of the earth as a primary sport, it really is putting its tendrils out there.
yeah, and it's trying.
Yeah.
It's trying, but you got like in Europe, it's very much so.
It's soccer or football is so
over there.
entrenched. Yeah,
it's so entrenched. But
Is it also a matter of trying to find the fields that can be played on?
yeah, well, there's no rugby league fields in Greece, and obviously we play on the soccer fields.
Yeah.
And then the other, it's a very dry, arid country, so there's not many grass fields. So you're playing on that artificial turf, which is
That's not going to be kind on the
Yeah,
skin, is it?
no, a bit of those synthetic burns, which are always fun.
I mean, we've got no, I suppose, the World Cup have decided to, cut the teams down, which is disappointing for us.
I always felt it should almost be the opposite, right? Where you have more teams, but kind of like how rugby sevens have their tiered intra competitions where the big nations play for the cup, but then there's a plate and a shield or something like that to spur competition on between the developing nations.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of their arguments was the blowout scores, and as I said to him, well, I don't know if you've been watching the NRL, but there's a blowout score too. I said everyone can beat everyone on their day, and if you have an off day, you're going to get beat.
Exactly.
But I just think to start a new sport in another country like Greece or Italy, Lebanon, all those sorts of countries that are trying to establish rugby league that have links to Australia in relation to the people that have moved there. I mean, I suppose there's that many Greeks that live outside of Greece, that live in different countries that, give them every opportunity to qualify for a World Cup by having more teams in the World Cup. I mean, it's not. I mean, what do the Union have now? 24.
Yeah.
I mean, we cut ours down to 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is, it's not really developing the game in other nations that are trying to develop it.
Yeah, especially when that is the main competing sport against rugby league in the countries that we're trying to, develop a level of competition in.
That's right.
I mean, you're never going to those countries. You're never going to overtake soccer.
No, of course not.
But you can carve out your niche against rugby union. Exactly.
That's it. Yeah, and rugby unions obviously has its history and being able to have their niche through playing through the school systems and colleges and all that sort of stuff. So.
I mean, a 10 teams. It's not really a World Cup. It's just
No,
it's not really the world.
No, it's almost
like a challenger series.
again like a showcase.
Yeah.
It's rather than a World Cup as such. But I guess even then, I suppose that's a growth on the years gone by when the World Cup would be four teams.
Essentially 4 nations:
Australia, England, New Zealand, France.
That's right,
So just quickly too, did you take many local like Greek?
Yeah, so we
Greek-based players.
So we had a squad of 25, and we had 6 domestic players.
Yep.
And come from Greece. They came direct, and we actually had one domestic player who's living in Melbourne now, playing rugby league. He came as well. So we had 7 all up from the squad, and then in the girls we had 19 players come across. Half of them were from the domestic comp, the other half were from Sydney, OLI, and we had one girl reach out from us from Atlanta that wanted to play, and she played as well. Yeah,
that's awesome.
That was pretty good.
And what do you think of the domestic players?
Well, domestic players have been playing for a while. We know majority of the domestic players in the Greek rugby league that can play at a higher level. And they're I mean, you would equate them to, say, SG ball level. Yeah. And they're obviously starting the game at 16, 17.
Yeah.
They're always behind the 8 ball, and that's probably the next thing, starting to get into the schools and running junior competitions and under-19 competitions. But again, it's hard without any money.
Yeah, but a reasonable standard to expect from a country where so few people would be playing the sport, to have players that could equate to that sort of level. So they're doing well for themselves individually if they're at that level. So I wonder if we'll ever get to the day where a younger player's been playing domestically in one of these developing countries, and then an NRL club takes a chance on them, brings them in, puts them into their pathways programs, and sees how they go. Just like they find players in New Zealand or Pacific Islands or Papua New Guinea, put them into pathways.
Suppose the tough thing with that one is that they'd have to start playing when they're 13, because to get into a pathway system, by 19, you pretty well know if they're going to make it or not. Yeah, so unfortunately, we get them at 19, 20, 21 when they've played different sports, like wrestling or volleyball or something like that, where they've turned their hand to league. Yeah.
Steve, as always, talking to you gives us some seriously good gear for the podcast. I mean, your insights into the junior reps are always fantastic, but talking NRLW and International Rugby League, it's a real treat as well. Just adding a lot of flavour.
We couldn't let Steve be here without.
We couldn't.
Grilling him on those.
Yeah, and that was really cool, just seeing some insight into the Greek football there. So thank you for sharing, mate. We seriously appreciate the opportunities to discuss the pathways, the NRLW, international football, and we always look forward to catching up. So hopefully we can slot you in again once the reps wrap up and maybe.
Oh no, we're aiming for the end of the regular season.
Yeah.
For the chat, and then
do a debrief,
and then a debrief at the end of the final series.
So really looking forward to having those catch ups there, and hopefully having all the teams in the finals. Obviously the Mats have to get into gear, and the Tarsha Gale need to find a couple of wins as well just to secure themselves. But it's going to be fun watching them progress, and we've got a big weekend. So we'll let you get back to it because we know you're a busy man. But thanks for coming to the tip sheet, mate.
No worries at all. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.